Okay. So
you did 5.
Yes.
I did 10. Pecking order of best quarterbacks in Vikings history.
So just to go back to when the pandemic started, and I did originally then a list for Score North that, as I said, it was Mackey, it was Judd, it was Collar, and Royce voted, and we got a top 5. The top 5 back then was Tarkenton 1, Culpepper 2, I believe it was Favre 3, Tommy Kramer was 4, and Warren Moon was 5, okay?
Mm-hmm.
For the purposes of this exercise, I will keep it at 5. And for the purposes of what we're doing and hearing the case for Kirk, which is, he's good statistically. He really is. And do I think he can lead this team to a championship? No. Do I think he's a bust of a quarterback? Absolutely not. That's not fair. I will put Kirk Cousins 5. I'll put Kirk Cousins 5. I will put Tommy Kramer 4. And I know his stats aren't great, but I saw him play quite a bit. He was, at that time, a very good quarterback, a first-round draft pick. You can certainly debate it. And Kramer, when the Score North list was put out by us, Phil, Kramer was the lightning rod because there were a lot of people saying, how can Tommy Kramer be on this list in the top 5? There were conversely a lot of old-timers like my age saying, Kramer's 5? Kramer should be 2, no question. So I'm putting Kramer 4 because I think that's fair. It's debatable, but at least it's fair. Tommy Kramer should not be 2. You can argue it, but you're doing so from a standpoint, I think then of, I remember Tommy Kramer. Number 3, one good year, one not so good year, but I'm sorry, Brett Favre. And to me, what Brett Favre does at number 3 on this list is it just drives home the point again of a team that's been around since 1961 that has had so few really impact quarterbacks. And Brett Favre in 2009 was a definite MVP candidate, had an off-the-charts year. And yes, I know to this day there are some with the Vikings who hate the fact that he played for this team. But the reality is it's a reminder of how few great quarterbacks this franchise has truly had.
We were the nerdy high school kid that stumbled into the prom queen for one night, baby. One night. So we came from the doldrums of T-Jack and Gus Farrat and our guy Brooks Bollinger and Kelly Holcomb. And all of a sudden the prom queen's like, you know what? I'm going to take you to the dance. That was Brett Favre in 2000.
Oh, I think it was way more than the dance. I think it was back to the room.
It was definitely back to the room.
But I mean, how many, in Vikings history, how many Greg Lewis games do we have? Like, there are a few. I'm not saying there are none. But how many Greg Lewis, oh my God, did he just do that? And we all went from thinking, okay, he's a 40-year-old quarterback. He's going to do a really good job of, if you guys recall, managing the game, to holy bleep, he still got it. And that's a cannon for an arm. And that season took off to the point of, I put him 3. You can debate it, but I do it. Number 2, I think it's pretty clear cut. Daunte Culpepper. First round draft pick, 1999, had franchise quarterback abilities. 2004 MVP type year, and I think he might have been the MVP of the league if Peyton Manning hadn't had such a great year that year himself. Got hurt in 2005, and that was pretty much the end of Dante's career. But I don't think you can say the Vikings missed on that pick. I think it was a very good pick, and Daunte Culpepper, in what was a quarterback heavy first round that year, gave you some really good years and some really good production and played the game in a style that certainly has been developed since then. But Denny Green saw something there, and he was not wrong. And so I put, for his time starting for this team, I put Daunte Culpepper too.
He was a force.
And then, there are some who will debate this. There are a lot, I think, who won't, and it's very wise. Fran Tarkenton. Fran Tarkenton started for this franchise from 61 to 66, gets traded to the Giants, comes back here, 72, I think it was, and plays for the Vikings through 78, and in that time leads them to 3 Super Bowls. Yes, they lost all 3 games, but I don't think that there's a big debate here. I think Fran Tarkenton is easily 1A, B, and C probably on the list of greatest Viking quarterbacks of all time.
Yep. So our lists are actually very different. They're very different. I mean, they're similar in certain spots because how can they not be? But so I ranked 10 of them, greatest quarterbacks in Vikings history. And I just want to go back to Emailer Lance brings up some great points. So if Kirk Cousins continues to play this way and wins a big playoff game, every year or two, I don't think anyone expects Tom Brady success from him. If he does play this way through another 5 or 6 years, like Kirk Cousins is going to be pretty damn high on this list, and the Vikings are going to have a chance to maybe do something beyond just getting to the playoffs. But my honorable mention before I even get into the 10 is Teddy Bridgewater. He didn't make my 10, but Teddy Bridgewater is the honorable mention and sort of the what could have been example on this list. And I just want to point out that my 2 pieces of criteria are peak greatness and longevity. And I put peak greatness ahead of longevity when I consider where you should fall on this list.
Which is why Brett Favre is number 1 on your list.
Like, were you considered among the best next to your peers when you played, even whether it was for 5 minutes or 10 years? Like, that matters more to me than how long you played for the Vikings. Sure. All right. So number 10 on my list is Case Keenum. Case Keenum had one of the more memorable quarterback seasons in Vikings history, and is partially responsible for one of the greatest plays in Vikings history. I would argue that there's 3 people responsible. There's Case Keenum for just throwing a pass. So there's Stephon Diggs for making a catch and then not going out of bounds, instead running for the end zone. And then there's that idiot safety for the Saints that just didn't play defense the way he should have on that play. But
that's fair.
But Case Keenum's 10 on my list.
Gotcha.
I've got Wade Wilson, number 9, mostly for longevity. He was a Vikings quarterback for like 10 years and had some good games. So his longevity puts him on this list at 9. Brad Johnson for mostly longevity and a couple of bright spots at number 8. Warren Moon is 7th on my list. He had one really good season with the Vikings in like 1995, and then a couple decent seasons. The Vikings won more games than they lost during that period. And it would have been interesting to see Warren Moon in like the 2 or 3 years before he came to if he would have been a Vikings quarterback a little bit younger, right? Sure. I got Tommy Kramer outside my 5, even after thinking on this for a month and a half, the last time we did these rankings for ScoreNorth.com. Tommy Kramer to me was like longevity more than peak level of greatness. And at no point in his career, outside of maybe his one big year, was he ever regarded as one of the top 5 or 6 guys in the NFL. He was a good quarterback for like 10 years. He's got a couple of playoff wins, but you know, his playoff performances, he played in 6 playoff games, 3 touchdowns, 7 picks, 56.7 rate. Like, you know, he was like
the raw stats are not his friend.
And that factors in for me.
Yeah,
and I didn't see him play
are not
really.
Going to be his friend.
So he's number 6.
Yep.
Number 5 is Kirk Cousins.
Yep.
And I wouldn't have put Kirk Cousins ahead of Tommy Kramer if not for the second half of the Saints playoff game last year. I'm giving Kirk Cousins elevated status for he moved a step forward in the playoffs.
You weren't at the Met in December of '80 when Ahmad caught the Hail Mary pass at the 2 to beat the Browns and give the Vikings the NFC Central title.
Can I say hot take alert? Maybe save this for Wednesdays. Kirk Cousins deserves more credit for his dagger pass against the Saints than Tommy Kramer does for his pass in 1980.
Yeah, okay, youngster.
Just a pinpoint, perfect pass to Adam Thielen.
The boomerang
wasn't a lucky
youngster. I'll tell you that right now.
So the only thing about Cousins, and this is why he's not, just to put a wrap on Lance's email, why he's not on Fran Tarkenton's level for a bunch of different reasons, longevity included. In Kirk Cousins' 5 years as a starting quarterback in the NFL, at no point would you consider him like one of the 5 guys in the league, right? It's in his 5 years, it's been Brady, Wilson, Mahomes, Rodgers, Breeze. Even now, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson are in that conversation. So he's just like, could he be at some point? He's got to keep winning big games and playing well. Number 4, Randall Cunningham. Again, peak greatness. 1998 was one of the great quarterback seasons of the 90s. Thanks in part to Randy Moss, but 1998 Randall Cunningham is on my list.
Thanks largely to Moss, but he did have a great year.
It was great.
So he had a great year.
Number 3 is Daunte Culpepper. Dante was a near MVP in 2004, if not for Peyton Manning breaking the touchdown record at the time, and one of the great running quarterbacks of all time for 3 or 4 years. And Dante also played in an NFC Championship game. So Dante's number 3.
I know who's 2.
Brett Favre is number 2 on my list. You could argue that 2009 was the greatest quarterback season in Vikings history. You could make that case, just statistically, memorably.
The intangibles he brought. No, I know. Yep. That's my point in sticking him 3rd. Yes,
he doesn't
it's
have
one unbelievable season.
He doesn't have Tommy Kramer longevity or even Wade Wilson longevity, but in 2009, Brett Favre was regarded as the man in the NFL, and so He's number 2 on my list, and Fran Tarkenton's number 1. Widely regarded as a top 5 quarterback in his era. I think at any given time between like the early 60s and mid 70s, it was Tarkenton, not in this order, but Tarkenton, Staubach, Unitas, Bart Starr, Len Dawson.
Lenny Dawson smoking at halftime.
Terry Bradshaw, Joe Namath are going to be on that list too, but statistically, Fran Tarkenton was much better than those guys were. I think Fran Tarkenton was a top 5 quarterback of his era.
First guy to scramble too.
Absolutely.
Now,
Yep.
So here's why I tend to agree with you on Favre, who you have at 2 and I have at 3, and I'll debate you a little bit more on Cunningham being 4 on your list, is because of this question. If you take Brett Favre off the 2009 Vikings, there's no doubt in my mind it's a good team. It's not a great team. Like, It doesn't get as far.
They do not get to the NFC
They don't
Championship
get there. The San Francisco game is lost for sure.
Actually, let's do the apples to apples. If you were to replace 2009 Brett Favre with 1998 Brad Johnson, how far do they go? They don't go to the NFC Championship.
I think they're a playoff team. I think they're a nice team.
Yep, they win like 10 games.
But they are not a team that you think could win the Super Bowl going into the playoffs. And the 2009 Vikings, without a doubt, and they had the first round bye, were a team that you felt could win a Super Bowl. If you take Randall Cunningham off the 98 Vikings and Brad Johnson, let's say for the sake of the conversation, never gets hurt, I think the team is equally as good. And so that's where I will fight on Favre and say he deserves every ounce of credit he gets. Cunningham had a great year and developed a really good chemistry with Moss, but Moss and that offense was so dynamic that I do think Brad Johnson could have had great success there.
Yeah. So, I think Cunningham was a step up for that year over Johnson, but we'll never know. It's hard to prove.
But Favre, I mean,
I'm sticking to this list.
You take a quarterback and not Tavares or Sage, but let's say they had gotten a different quarterback who was better and had been a starter. I still think they're a good team, but I do not think they're anywhere near what Brett Favre took that team to. Yeah. He was incredible.
So to bring it all full circle, emailer Lance, thank you for the inspiration here. Kirk Cousins has a lot of work to do to get on Fran Tarkenton's level.
So in your world, how much work?
Go to some Super Bowls, right?
Yeah.
Like, go to some Super Bowls. If you win a Super Bowl at some point, all right, we'll talk. But go to some Super Bowls like Fran Tarkenton did, and at some point be regarded as a top 5 quarterback during your era, even if it's for a shorter amount of time. But like, unless he goes to Super Bowls or wins a Super Bowl or becomes a consensus top 5 quarterback.
Yep.
So now if he's not a top 5 quarterback, but the team is there and they win the Super Bowl.
Yep.
Now we can have a discussion. Now he moves above Brett Favre. Now he moves above Daunte Cunningham. He's probably above that guy. Old Timberwolves forward. Daunte Culpepper.
Great for the Pelicans.
And he moves above Randall Cunningham on my list.
What are the most, in your mind being a stats guy, what are the stats that fool us the most as far as trying to make comparisons? Because I do believe but I'm saying in all of sports today, like NBA, 3-point shooting stats, if you go back and look at 1985 or something, it fools you completely because the game was a different game. In my mind, quarterback statistics rank up there as far as the stats that if you just look at raw stats and don't go back and watch games, fool you completely because the game itself has been shifted so drastically.
Strikeouts in baseball, you're going to see
100%.
Mediocre pitch. Like Kyle Gibson's going to have more strikeouts in his career at the end of the day than like Hall of Fame pitchers from the early part of the 1900s.
Good one. Yeah.
Like Cy Young is regarded as one of the greatest pitchers of all time from the early 1900s, and he's the strikeout king and the strikeout machine. Well, he wasn't striking out 11 batters, 14 batters per 9 like Garrett Cole is. Walter Johnson, the big train. That guy was striking out nobody.
Oh, come on. Mike Stanton be no competition for the big train. But there are a handful at least of stats that if you try and do era to era comparisons just fall completely flat because the games have changed so much.
Yeah. So those are our rankings. That's our pecking order here on Purple Daily. Phil Mackey, Judd
Tommy Kramer, get him in your top 5. People love Kramer.
Poor Tommy Kramer.
One of my favorites.
You can help the show by giving us a 5-star rating on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts, and also by subscribing to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/ScoreNorth. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Hit that subscribe button and help us out pumping out this daily Vikings content for you all. Thank you.